Okay.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. This is going to be, I hope, an interesting discussion on environmental justice. There are a lot of projects going on here in Tallahassee, from city projects, county, blueprint, and a lot of people, I think, have questions and are concerned about their impacts. So here we're going to try to reach out to our elected officials, those who make the decisions at the top, and have a discussion about the process and what we can do to improve the process. So I'm going to give it over to Anassa Hicks, who is our vice chair of the Environmental Justice Committee, and she's going to take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It's very exciting to see all of you, and thank you in particular to our commissioners who were kind enough to come to this meeting. So right now, I'm just going to briefly run down what the meeting's going to look like. First, there will be introductions of the Environmental Justice Committee. We're going to ask, as people ask questions, we're going to ask you to introduce yourselves. But there are currently 29 people on this call, so we will not be asking everyone to introduce themselves up front. So first, we're going to introduce ourselves, and then I'm going to do a really brief kind of explanation of how this meeting came about. We had a first meeting with Blueprint representatives on April 28th, so I will get into that. And then the meat of the meeting is really going to be, we hope, Southside residents asking the questions that they have about infrastructure plans in Tallahassee to our elected officials. So the way we did it the last time this happened, which worked pretty well, was there were 2 rounds of question and answers. So I collected questions, and then at the time it was Blueprint representatives answered those questions, and then we did that exact same thing again, just for the sake of kind of expediting the process. So that's what we're going to do. 2 rounds of question and answer sessions. And then after that, I'm going to hand the metaphorical mic over to Max, and he's going to moderate a more open-ended discussion with the commissioners. So that will be more of a conversation. So as far as, I'll repeat this once we get the question and answer started, but as far as asking questions, the easiest and most straightforward way to indicate that you want to ask a question would be to raise your hand in Zoom. The way it looks on my screen, at the bottom of the screen, there's a reactions button where you have the option to raise your hand. So that would be the best way. But if that doesn't work, you can also raise your hand and I'll try to see you. So now I'm going to introduce myself, and then the other members of the committee will introduce themselves, and we'll get started that way. I am Anassa Hicks. I teach at Florida State, and as Max said, I am the administrative vice chair of the Environmental Justice Committee. I'll pop it over to Max.
Well, I am the chairperson of the Environmental Justice Committee, and I am grateful to everyone that's here and my team who's been working really hard on this. Dana, who are you?
Hi, I'm Dana Martin, and I am the secretary of our committee. I will be taking the minutes and keeping track of time during this meeting. And Claudia?
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, team. Thank you, commissioners, so much for your time. Commissioner Williams-Cox, Commissioner Porter, Commissioner Matlow, other commissioners that may be coming on through the night, and those that wanted to be here today and couldn't. We really appreciate your willingness to meet in multiple spaces. City Hall is wonderful, and getting together more informally to engage is fantastic and is how we want to move forward together. So thank you. With all that said, you might guess I'm the group facilitator. I am trying hard to hold it all together. I'm going to help Dana keep track of time. She will help me keep track of time. I'm going to work to keep us on
do that.
No. And welcome everybody. Keep your mute button. Of course, we all blow it. Zoom is crazy, and we look forward to being together in person soon, which is so exciting. We're hovering on that edge, and we all want to get there together in the flesh and blood, but now we need to mute unless we're speaking intentionally. So part of my job as facilitator is to help keep us on point. So what point is it that we want to keep on? So I want to take a moment and talk about that. The point is environmental justice. The point is equity. Everybody here cares about equity, equality. We want everyone to have a great quality of life. We want all voices in all neighborhoods to be treated with respect and care. And that equity applies to this meeting that we're in right now, right? Politics is not something we do separate from our lives. It's part and parcel of our lives. So in this meeting tonight, my job as facilitator is to support equity in our conversation. Some of us speak a lot, like me. So my committee is always checking me because I talk a lot. Our commissioners get to speak a lot, and we want to hear what they have to say. That's why we're here. We also have some people on this call who have never spoken publicly before. We have people on this call who have never had a chance to dialogue with commissioners. And we want to make sure we are prioritizing equity in terms of listening to each other and supporting the voices from Southside, supporting the voices from historically African-American neighborhoods, and prioritizing voices who are new to political engagement. So I'm going to keep an eye out for that the whole night. A couple facilitation housekeeping things. Can everyone take a moment and go to the chat? And if you're comfortable, put your email in the chat, because what we're doing here is organizing. We want to build more bridges with each other, with our commissioners, so we can stay together and get more concrete results for Tallahassee. And to do that, we need to connect. So let's take a moment, and in the chat, while you're doing it, put in your neighborhood, because local matters. What's your neighborhood? Where do you live? So please add that too if you feel comfortable. Max, can you take a moment and put our Environmental Justice Committee address in the chat? And so everyone has a way of reaching us as well. I will put in my phone number in the chat. So after this meeting, anyone who wants to communicate anymore, call me, as well as emailing.
Sure.
So I think that's my facilitation moment. I'm going to talk briefly about environmental justice and then bring it back to Anassa. Environmental justice is an aspect of equity, and our committee hosting this tonight is the Environmental Justice Committee. So what does that mean? I've had colleagues ask me, why do we need this phrase? We already have environmentalism. What are you talking about? So what are we talking about? We're talking about human beings are part of the environment. We are not separate from it. We need to look at the inequity and the wealth gaps between rich and poor, and the way that environmental challenges affect the poor, people of color, so much more dramatically. And we need to understand that there's a weaving together of the earth and the trees and the sky and the people on it, because we are part of the ecosystem. So people, we need to be well, and we need to have justice. And then from that justice, we will take care of the earth better. So that's why we're focused on environment through caring about inequity, issues about infrastructure, and issues about development, because that's the whole ecosystem that we want to focus on in Tallahassee. So thank you for your time. Reach out to me in the chat anytime you feel your voice is not getting heard, or you have a question, or you're worried about getting overlooked. We want to get to everyone. We may not be able to, but we want to connect for real. So please do reach out to me, and I'll do my best to keep my radar wide open. Thank you for your time. And Anassa, thanks for continuing on.
I actually give a very quick definition of environmental justice. I know you did. If you don't mind, just give me 1 second. I pulled this off of EPA.gov. Environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Fair treatment means no group of people should bear a disproportionate share of the negative environmental consequences resulting from industrial, governmental, and commercial operations or policies. And this meaningful involvement means people have an opportunity to participate in decisions about activities that may affect their environment and health. The public's contribution can influence the regulatory agency's decision. Community concerns will be considered in the decision-making process, and decision makers will seek out and facilitate the involvement of those potentially affected. And I think we're all here because I know I'll speak for myself that I don't think that this is necessarily happening, and we're here to build some bridges. So thank you. I'll give it over to Vanessa.
Thank you. Thank both of you. I think that is a really good lead in to my explanation of why we are all here. And then we're going to turn it over to all of you so that your questions can get answered. So the reason that we're all here on Zoom tonight is that this is a continuation in the minds of the Environmental Justice Committee of a meeting that we convened on April 28th. That meeting was with representatives of the Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency. And that meeting came about in large part due to our chair, Max Epstein, and the work that he's done for years, really trying to investigate the infrastructure plans that Blueprint is implementing in Tallahassee and researching the impact that things like stormwater ponds, FAMU Way, city plans for the Alberta Empire neighborhood, researching the impact that those have had on those communities. We realized that a lot of Southside residents in particular, and I keep saying Southside because that's the neighborhood that some of these plans have already affected and future plans will affect, but really this is a question for all of Tallahassee. So a lot of people, a lot of residents had questions that they felt like weren't getting answered. And so we wanted to go directly to the source, to Blueprint. And so that meeting was on April 28th. I see some familiar names on the screen, so I think some of you at least were at that meeting. And so residents asked a lot of really specific and technical questions about stormwater ponds and their locations, whether certain areas were going to be, one gentleman, for example, asked, he'd heard that there had been like native burial sites found near where Blueprint was planning some infrastructure project, and asked whether that was true and whether that was allowed. So people, you know, got really in the weeds and asked some really specific and technical questions of Blueprint, but people also expressed some hard feelings of anguish and confusion about the way in which they felt their neighborhoods were being put to the side with what they felt was very little to no input from them, the residents of those neighborhoods. So that actually later on in the meeting, when I'm not talking, I might put the link to that meeting in the chat. If any of you have, 2 hours to kill and you want to watch the entire meeting, it's on YouTube. So I'm not going to describe it in any more detail than that, except to say that a lot of Blueprint's answers, speaking very generally, was that they are the implementers of plans that the city and county elected officials give them. So a lot of what they said was, we do what the city and county tell us to do. So we are implementing these projects, and sometimes they are difficult for people whose neighborhoods are affected, but we, Blueprint, are not in the lead as far as making those decisions. So that's why we're here tonight, because we want to talk to the people who are in the lead as far as making those decisions. So that's why we wanted to have a meeting with Tallahassee and Leon County's elected officials, and why we're so grateful to the commissioners who were able to make it tonight. So with that said, I am going to ask people who have questions to raise their hands, preferably on Zoom. That will be easier for me to see. But if you can't do that, please actually raise your hand. and I will look through and call on you. And if it's okay with the commissioners, I'll say that you can direct your question. You can direct your questions or your comments. If you just have feelings, you can say those too. You can direct those to all of the commissioners or one commissioner in particular if you have a question for one commissioner. So.
And something I do as facilitator is I just butt in. So like a goat, that's how I facilitate. So something that I just want to amplify Anassa's voice about questions is we want to ground first in Southside residents of color, and people that have not spoken with commissioners first. So we all have so much to say. And again, it's a privilege to have access to commissioners in this kind of setting. But I'm going to ask those of us like me who have gotten to ask questions to my commissioners before, I'm going to hold back and I'm going to give the floor to Southside residents of historically African-American neighborhoods, and those that have not spoken first.
Absolutely. So please, questions are welcome. Opening it up for questions. Raise your hand either on Zoom or literally physically.
We have Jackson Oberlin.
Jackson, please.
Hey everyone. I was wondering if any of the commissioners had an idea of a timeline when the climate emergency declaration would be introduced. If anyone has any ideas on what that timeline would look like.
So what I was envisioning, thank you for that question. What I was envisioning was collecting a lot of questions and then kind of, listing them back to the commissioners. That helped things go more quickly the last time. But are there any more questions right now?
We had a bunch last time.
We had a lot of questions last time. It can take a while for people to warm up to ask questions.
Let's give time, especially with the idea of prioritizing people that have not asked questions before. It can be a challenge to even have the clarity about, everyone knows they want things to be even better in Tallahassee, more fair, more just, the environment and the infrastructure and the development to be more fair, more just, but specifically it can be a challenge. So while people are gathering ideas, your commissioners are here for you. They are our leaders. They're also our public servants. So don't be concerned that your question is not a good one. They are here to listen, and questions about what's going on with infrastructure, who makes the decisions. You hear about these enormous things happening in Tallahassee or in your own neighborhood. How does this get decided? What's going on? You can ask questions, really anything in that realm or that might be on your mind.
If I could chime in, Claudia.
Yes, ma'am.
Answer Jackson's question. Is that appropriate?
Yeah, please.
Please do.
Okay. Thank you for the question. I met with, I think I saw Nia on the call. I met with several of our young people. I'm calling them that because many of them were in high school. And we talked about the climate declaration. And what we're doing, we're in the process right now. I'm working with our experts on what's in the climate declaration, the proposal. What are the things that we can absolutely do, and what are the things that we are not able to do? The timeline for meeting some of the goals that are listed in there are 2050, which aligns with our renewable energy plan. So we're in the process right now, and I responded to them, I believe last week, that we were still working on going through the declaration to determine those things that we could agree to and those things that we couldn't, and anything that we can't agree to, an explanation will be provided. So we are right now in the process of working through that. I do not have a timeline. Our last commission meeting is July 7th. So I do not think that it will happen by then, but I'm hoping that it will be sometime this fall.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do either of the other commissioners want to answer that question? seems like it might not be a question with lots of different interpretations. That just might be the answer, but
Yeah.
if either of them want to.
Well, if I may, I agree with everything that Commissioner Williams-Cox said. We want to make sure that we do our due diligence. I want people to know that on the one hand, the commission does have a lot of flexibility to act more quickly on certain issues. And then sometimes it is appropriate to take more time to consult with our other plans and with our experts. And so to make sure that we're doing things right. And so I want to express both that we have the flexibility to act, but that there are reasons that when we want to get everyone on board, there's, government can be very complicated. There's a lot of plans that we have moving forward, and we want to make sure that it's consistent and that we are taking a holistic approach.
Thank you.
And yeah, I'll chime into that too. I mean, I think that sets the stage well. We're a body of 5 diverse opinions. I think we've all probably seen a proposal that's come forward. There isn't a set date scheduled for adoption right now. But I think the best thing as citizens, activists, or just concerned neighbors that you can do is stay engaged with each individual commissioner's office, so you can see what they support, see what they don't support, see if there's any questions that can be answered to help move the process along. A lot of the times information is key. We work on so many different issues, and we need to really dive in and understand the specifics of each issues. And in a commission meeting, if not everybody is aware of the ins and outs of what you're talking about, it can be difficult to try to explain it in the moment. So I think really the work people do on the front end or the back end, just communicating with their commission offices, what's important to them, what should be included, what needs to be included, and then giving commissioners the time to consult with people they know that are more knowledgeable. I think we'll all admit that we don't know everything about everything. A lot of us don't know much about anything, and that's okay. We go out and learn, but I do think it's just I think it's something, as Commissioner Williams-Cox said, that could be done this fall or by the end of the year, but there's not a hard date yet.
I'd like to ask a general question of the commissioners. To what extent is the welfare of the residents in the low-income areas being considered, and what general plans for those residents, low income, that'll be disrupted by any plans in the redevelopment?
I'll go first, if you would, and I'm not sure which area you're determining to be low income. I live on the south side, and
South side, of course.
well, south side is not just low income, but I do live on the south side and have lived here for 30 plus years, and so I have a vested interest in making sure that my neighbors, not just on the south side but anywhere, will not be harmed by anything that we do. And that's why we consult with the experts. And that's why we try to make sure that there's consistency across plans. And we also try to make sure that our neighbors have access to us to ask questions, to talk about what's impacting them, and trying to get answers for them, meeting with them, talking with them, better understanding what is the perceived impact, providing information to make sure that something has not been miscommunicated. So those are the things that we do to try to make sure that we understand the impact and that we can communicate the impact, and communicate the impact to the neighbors as well as to the folks who are going to be doing the work. So that, in a nutshell, that's pretty much what I do. I believe that my goal, my job as a commissioner is to advocate and to educate, along with make policy for things to happen. Let me just share, for those of you who don't know me, before being elected to the city commission, I worked on the south side for 30 plus years in the community, making sure that people understood what was happening. I went to commission meetings, I went to CRA meetings, I went to lots of different meetings, city, county, and school board, advocating on behalf of people on the south side. Because as you said earlier, many do not go to those meetings and many do not speak to elected officials. But I wanted to be their voice. And so I did that before being elected. And then I got elected and I continue to be that. And so that's what I do to try to make sure that we understand the impact of the residents on here on the South Side or in places, as well as making sure that our experts, our staff understands that impact as well. Thank you.
I see that Commissioner Porter has her hand up.
Hi, I just wanted to address your question. I am new to the commission. There have been a lot of projects where I think we've seen we could have done and should have done a lot better. One thing that we rely on, especially as commissioners, or I'll just speak for myself, is the work groups like yours do and the neighborhoods organizing. And I know that that is not enough, and it is the burden of the city, I believe, to do this outreach, to make sure that when we make plans, when we implement plans, that we are doing our due diligence to do the least harm and the most good for all people. One thing that I have been thinking about that I would like to see, and that was brought to my attention by Cleo and some other people, is, and we've talked about it tonight, you know, the equity piece, something like an equity report that comes along with our agenda materials, so that we know that this is being directly addressed. And I'm not trying to act like that would answer be the one solution to all of these problems. But I think that, you know, we have a fiscal impact, we have different impacts that are included as part of our agenda materials. And I think something like a community impact or an equity impact is something that would be a good start for giving us the information that we need. And I also just want to say that, to the points, I mean, while it is true technically that commissioners do set the policy agenda and direction for the projects that staff implements, there is a lot that never comes to our level, that we do not know about, that I don't necessarily agree with. And we make decisions as a body, and those decisions do not reflect every single individual commissioner's desires. And so while that is true, it is incumbent upon all of us that we stay as involved as possible, that we work together so that we know as much as possible about what is going on.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Commissioner Matlow, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you. And that question, when I was running for office, I was talking to Commissioner Bill Proctor, and one of the things he told me was like, the people who will need your help the most are people who will never donate to your campaign, never show up to volunteer, and probably never vote. And, you know, I take that to heart, because when you're talking about development projects and who's affected in low-income communities, it's like we have to have that with us, knowing that there are people that can be affected by our decisions, who will never express opposition, who will never organize or any of that. So we need to be proactive in knowing what our decisions, what the results of our decisions can be. And I do think that there are ways we can get ahead of that at the policy level. A lot of the times we hear about things and we start to react to them. It's like, oh, this is happening, or here's a project in place that's been going down the line for 6 years, and we realize there's a mistake with it, or it's going to be harmful in some way. But I do think, you know, every time that happens, we can look at what happened and get ahead of it. And specifically, the relocation policy of Blueprint, you know, comes to mind, of like how people who are going to be affected by our programs, that we can not just make them whole, but see them through and really do the best by people. So I think the way we can be the most productive is to look at policies that we can propose together that get ahead of the curve before the bulldozers are out coming for the tree. Do we have a policy that says, you know, we're going to take down commercial warehouse properties before we take down housing, like as a rule? Do we have a policy that we're going to avoid trees of a certain size in any road programs? Like, I think that's the way we really get to the root of the issues, because what it's always great, honestly, to see, you know, the community show up and be involved in government, because some days, you know, it's just the five of us and staff at a commission meeting, and there's least involvement, and we love the public participation. But I think the more we can get together, really get down to some of the root causes of people's animosity towards government, and really put in solid policies in place, I think for low income people, that's how we can help them the best.
Thank you. I see that Margaret Moore has a question, and right now, oh, okay, I see. Okay, I'm gonna call on Dr. Vanessa Williams first, and then Margaret Moore. Dr. Williams.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Vanessa Williams, and I live in the Bond community. Actually born and raised here in the community. I do have a concern. My concern is communicating, the commissioners communicating with the residents. And I know that during the election time, there's a lot of promises. There's a lot of things that said you're going to do or pursue. But I know during that year or during the course of that time, maybe those things got pushed aside or what have you. But is there any way that the commissioners can communicate with the residents halfway through whatever they're doing to let us know, hey, look, this is not going to happen, but you know, this is happening. I just think that there should be a little bit of more communicating with the officials that represent that particular area. Like we say, a lot of people are not going to go to City Hall, but we do have local places like, and I know the pandemic has really, you know, thrown us off a little bit, but we do have local places that are close to the residents in the community that, hey, we can call a meeting, bring the information to those that cannot make it to those meetings to find out, hey, look, this is where we at. We know these things are supposed to be happening, but like I know, there was one that was supposed to be affordable housing in the Bond community. That was one thing that I was really looking to, the affordable housing. You know, that way that will help a lot of people, maybe that's homeless or people that are renting, can begin to buy, you know, to build a community. So I just think that we just need a little bit more communication from the elected officers concerning that community to keep us abreast as to where we're going. So I know I got a letter, let me tell you, and I thank God for that. The first letter I got a week ago, where they sent me a letter. They said, hey, we're gonna be doing some work on your street. There's going to be some workers out there. Haven't seen that. I've never seen a letter like that, but I'm glad that it did come, because I was able to see what was going on. They say they will be on Saxon Street. They're going to have a badge. If I needed to go down and say, hey, whatever, they will identify themselves. That's the things that we need in the community to be abreast, to know what's going on. Also, and if there's something that that elected officer was pushing during election, and they see where, hey, look, this is not going to happen, I think it needs to come back to the community. Hey, look, we need, you know, this is not just plain communicating, just letting us know what is going on and what to expect in the next year or what to expect in the next month. I just think that they should do a little bit more. We should have a little bit more communicating, because I know back in the years when my mom and my grandparents, there were no communicating like it is now. Thank God things are different. Like this meeting tonight, I thank God for it. And it's a super thing that we can talk to the commissioners, because back in the day, you know, it was even heard of. But I do see things are coming along, and I thank God. I thank the commissioners, and I thank the group that asked us to come, because we do have a voice. We do want to know, and we want to be involved. If we will be able to communicate and communicate with the residents, you know, because you have a lot of people, the Bond community where I live, I'm a home owner, but you know, you have a lot of people that rent. So I don't know how you distinguish between what you need to talk about or whatever, but a lot of people that's renting, you know, they're not really concerned, but homeowners are really concerned about the growth and what is coming forward, you know. So I just think that communicating and reaching the people, letting us know what's going on and what to expect and even the stormwater thing. Those things are like they're putting them in the south side like crazy. You know, I'm like, wait a minute. You know, are this the dumping ground or what? You know, nobody knows. You know, but just a little bit more communicating, letting us know, hey, look, this is what's happening. This is what to expect. That's all.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
You're
So I'm going to ask Margaret to ask her question now. And I wrote down everything you said, Dr. Williams. We will be circling back to that. And I will ask the commissioners to answer that question, but I'm just going to have Margaret ask her question or make her comment, and then we'll come back.
Hey y'all, Margaret Moore, 1910 Monticello, District 3, registered Democrat, all that goodness. At the commission meeting yesterday, Commissioner Williams-Cox, I was really grateful you showed a big map of the map of the South Side Action Plan communities. And I don't think I'd ever really seen it up close like that. And I wondered, are you in one of the neighborhoods that's in the South Side Plan?
I live on the south side. In the south side, that boundary that we showed last night.
You're in.
From all,
okay, I was just curious because I was wondering, like, when was that map made? I mean, that's a quick question right now. Or when was it last amended? Or how does it? Okay, here we go. Just take a list and also, like, when was that map made? How does it get amended? Who decides who's included on it? Is this a staff project? Like, I see certain neighborhoods that are in Southside, but they're not on the Southside Action Plan map. And that makes me wonder what they're going to be able to benefit from if they're not in the plan. And then if we can get them in the plan, how can we do that? So.
Vanessa, you want me to, she gave me a lot of questions, and I prefer answering them as in the moment. I wanted to answer Dr. Williams as well, but I will abide by how you want to facilitate.
Dr. Williams has her hand up again, so I suspect it's related to her first question.
I didn't put it down, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, never mind. Okay, then we will, so first I will ask the commissioners, no other questions right now. To go back to Dr. Williams's question, she asked basically about communication, about, the promises that commissioners make during election season that people get excited about. And then often it seems like those things fall by the wayside. I thought her proposal or suggestion of some kind of like midterm update about what is going to happen and what is not going to happen would be really useful. She talked about bringing policies and bringing updates to people where they are, because as several commissioners have pointed out, not everyone can come to commissioner meetings. Not everyone's going to email you. Not everyone's going to show up at your office. But that doesn't mean those people don't have needs or concerns. And what I heard, I'm not sure Dr. Williams used this word, but what I heard when she was talking was accountability, basically.
Yes.
For commissioners when they, when they say they're going to do things. And I'm sympathetic to the difficulties of governing. Not everything that you want to happen does happen. But just, do any of the commissioners have any thoughts on what she's saying about the need for more communication and more transparency about plans being made for Tallahassee?
Absolutely. I would like to talk with Dr. Williams about that. And good seeing you again, Dr. Williams. One of the things that I promised during campaign season was to be accessible. And I have done that. And yes. COVID did slow us down a little bit, but I still held community meetings via Zoom or conference calls to try to make sure we stayed in communication. I've also, before COVID, I was the commissioner who advocated bringing commission meetings to the neighborhoods. We did a commission meeting at Smith Williams. We did a commission meeting at Hartsfield Elementary. We did commission meetings at Gilchrist. I also have a Facebook page, and I know everybody's not on Facebook, but a lot of people are. So I have a Facebook page for my office, and what I try to do is I try to on my city page, I try to alert folks to things that are happening. And I always tell you to stay woke, trying to make sure you know what's, things that are going to be happening that are going to be good for the community. On my personal page, those are my personal thoughts and my personal things that I put there as well. But they also provide information about things that are happening in the community. Also, but prior to coming to the commission, one of the things that I did was I went to talgov.com and also went to Leon County's website, and I subscribed to receive text messages, newsletters, all those kinds of things for those subjects that I'm interested in, so that I would receive directly either a text message or a notification of things that were going to be going on. I encourage you to do that as well. Also, I put my email address in the chat. I know that many of you have it. I've also said that anyone who wants to meet with me, I'm ready to meet. My aide, Dr. Tawanda Diawala Davis, her number is out there to make sure that if you want to meet with me, I make myself available. This is all that I do. I don't have another job. I don't have another business. I'm a full-time commissioner because the only way to do it right is to be there full-time. I receive emails to my personal phone. I receive emails and text messages because my number was out there before I became a commissioner. And I respond. I try to get it over to my city side, but I respond because when people need help, they need help. And I don't want to send people through loops and hoops to get the help they need. I get help requests for help that I have no authority over. School board issues, things in the county. I have no authority over those. But what I do when I receive those is I reach out to resources, people who I know can help. And I know that because I've worked in the community for 30 plus years. And so I know that our staff, neighborhood affairs, they send information out, or they try to send information out. If you were watching last night, we have an updated neighborhood policy that I hope will help with that. So if I am not communicating with you in a way that you feel is adequate, please let me know. I want to communicate with you. I want to be there for you. That's all that is all that I am doing. That is my job. Okay. And I do take it seriously.
Thank you so much. Again, it's such an honor to hear and feel
Thank you. Thank you.
the warmth and the sincerity. And part of my job as facilitating is to help us stay on point. And I will be a goat and I will butt in sometimes. So this is a moment that the question I heard from Dr. Williams was not so much wanting information about how the people can come to the government, but I heard her question saying, we are asking you all to actually reach out harder to communicate with us, because it is true that I know it's so hard to believe when you're a commissioner, and with your experience in the community, that you may be able to imagine that more than many, but for many people, just the idea of sending a message to your commissioner is just way, way beyond. So many people are so disenfranchised or so disconnected from their own agency that it does not occur to many people to reach out. So I do want to just echo Dr. Williams speaking her resident truth, that she's asking not that she needs to be told how to email you all, but she's asking, can a structure be set up so that there's more outreach to people? So that's one point. And the second point is, I just do want to share that it took a lot of outreach to get you to this meeting, that I actually emailed multiple times, and it took a lot of effort for
Claudia,
me.
I listen, I received every one of your emails, one of your emails.
Thank you.
And we did respond, but even after we responded, we continued to receive emails, but I didn't know I needed to keep responding. But I hope that Dr. Williams knows better than, because we worked together long before I came to the commission. So if I didn't answer your question, I'll give you a call, okay?
Okay. Sound good.
Thank you. I just, again, want to hold that idea that
Thank you.
residents are asking for more outreach from the commissioners, and the idea that it's not always as easy for residents to reach commissioners and to get that connection as we all might think.
I want to give Commissioners Porter and Matlow a chance to answer that question. And I also have not forgotten about Maggie's question. So we're going to circle back to that too. But I guess we'll just keep going in the order that we kind of have created here. So Commissioner Porter and then Commissioner Matlow.
Thank you. I just wanted to chime in really quickly. Thank you, Dr. Williams, for your points. I hear you loud and clear, and I know that I hear that from a lot of people. You know, ideally, we wouldn't need and I say this, people shouldn't need to be watching everything and going through with a fine comb, because they should just trust their elected officials. I think that there's a lot of ways that the city can do a much better job of outreach. You know, there's so much technology out there these days, like you said, where I would love to see somehow that you can sign up with your geographical boundaries, your neighborhood boundaries, so that you get text updates, so that you get pinged whenever there's an item on the agenda that is going to impact your neighborhood. Or let's say, for instance, you sign up for, because the emails there, I do encourage everyone to sign up for those emails. And on my website, which I will post, I have a calendar that you can subscribe to. But I totally hear you. And, you know, during the campaign, we utilized a lot of text messaging. I just think we need to move our city into the future and make the most out of our agenda materials and the data we have, because there are a lot of ways that I see other cities and other companies or brands engaging with residents that we need to implement and take seriously as an imperative, and not just as a cute thing to do, but as the right of residents to have access to that information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Matlow.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you, Dr. Williams, for the question. You know, communication is one of those things that's always a work in progress. As Tallahassee, we represent nearly 200,000 residents. So we are always actively engaging different neighborhood groups, different areas, you know, hosting meetings like this. I know we were at Orange Avenue Apartments last Sunday, having kind of a pop-up event where people just went door to door and invited people to come hear from our commissioners. I think one of the underlying questions you're asking is investments in neighborhoods that were talked about on campaigns, and getting an update on, you know, when those things would be delivered. And I know I admit it's slower than I think a lot of us would like getting through government. You know, I was elected in 2018, and a lot of projects were put into motion back in 2014. So as we try to reallocate priorities, and as staff readjust to new commissioners and new visions for our city, it does take a little bit of time. But I do think, you know, updates in Bond, we saw the linear park come through, and I think you'll start seeing some signage around the neighborhoods and some vacant lots for some housing that's coming this way. One of our first CRA meetings, Commissioner Williams-Cox, there was a neighborhood plan speculating about $6 million. And we always talk about, are we actually going to fund the plans? And it's like right out of the gate, you know, she said, we need the $6 million and we need to start spending it. And it's taken 3 years to spend it, to just be able to get the projects in place and those sorts of things. But I think to see the real neighborhood change and to really fulfill the promise, we just need to up the investment over the time and really make sure, again, we're out there, like you're saying, reaching out to residents. We do hear from regular residents from Bond, but I understand that may not reach everybody. So, you know, a pop-up meeting, you know, I'd be happy to attend and go out there and speak with the folks there as well.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so please, if you have questions, raise your hand physically or in Zoom, but now we'll move on to Maggie's question, which was about the South Side Action Plan. She referred to a map that Commissioner Williams-Cox had up at a meeting last night, and just, I think in general, was asking about when and how that map was made and whether the boundaries are fixed, whether neighborhoods that fall outside of those boundaries, which sounds like could arguably be in Southside, but possibly technically are not, whether those neighborhoods would be part of the Southside Action Plan. So we'll start again with you, Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Thank you. The Southside Action Plan was formerly known as the Southern Strategy. And so it's been in the comp plan for 20 plus years. And that map was a part of that plan that was in place 20-some years ago, where not a lot of activity or action took place. So the map was not just drawn. It's been there for, like I said, 20+ years. And as far as how to amend it, I am not sure that it is that is open for amendment, because it was created as a part of the comprehensive plan. Now I know we do go in and look at the comprehensive plan from time to time, but this one has been sitting on the shelf for 20+ years. And so what we've done is we've activated this comp plan, this comp plan piece. And Max, you're right, but all parts of the comp plan are not modified every year. This piece had not been touched for 20+ years, as I mentioned. So to answer your question, it didn't just get drawn. It's been there for, like I said, 20+ years. And to modify the comp plan, there are prescribed procedures for doing so. There is, to my knowledge, there is no plan right now to modify the Southside Action Plan.
Thank you. Do the other commissioners want to respond to that? Okay, seems like no. Seems like a capacious response to that question. Okay, so
I just don't have enough information, but I'd be happy to look into it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so this is not really the last call for questions from Southside residents, concerned residents, but it's kind of the last call, because now I'm going to turn it over to Max, who's going to kind of moderate a more open-ended discussion with the commissioners. So a lot of the questions he's going to be asking are questions that we as a committee kind of distilled from our last meeting with Blueprint. So if you decide that you have a question in the course of the next 30 to 45 minutes, however long this meeting lasts, if you decide that you have a question, you can still raise your hand and ask it. We will call on you. But we're gonna transfer the meeting over to being moderated by Max. But it looks like Claudia has a point to bring up.
Just very briefly, we're using our time really well, so I appreciate that on everyone's part. And Anasa, thank you. I wanted to just hold this space for another moment. I know that we do have some residents on the call tonight that I've talked with personally that are Southside residents, and I'm getting to know their family stories, and I want to give them a moment. It's hard to speak up. It's not an easy thing to do, and there's no pressure, but I wanted to just give them another moment if they want to make a comment, tell a little piece of their story, or ask a question. I'm shouting out particularly to the Gimmons family and the McCaskills. Again, no pressure, y'all, but I wanna give you another moment if there's something you'd like to contribute before we hear from Max.
Also, if you really, really don't want to talk, you can put your question in the chat and I will read it. So that's another option.
This is Connie McCaskill.
Hey, Connie.
Hi.
It's great you're here.
I hadn't raised my hand because I couldn't figure out where the button is to raise your hand. But, we initially got involved because of a flyer that was handed out in the community regarding the April 28th meeting to address the inspection of the stormwater ponds, airport gateway construction, and what really got us concerned when it said potential seizure of more property on the south side. And what we're really interested in is sort of twofold: to know who to talk to specifically about what is going to go on the south side affected Alberta Empire, because that's where we live. We own a resident there. When we talk to people, sometimes they say, well, this is a Blueprint project. Otherwise, they say this is a city project. So you need to be able to know who do you talk to and who can specifically tell you what is going to happen to affect your property. Because we've been in that neighborhood for years. A lot of people rent. They probably not that concerned, the renters. But the owners, such as we are, who still live there, we are very concerned about knowing specifically what projects are gonna happen that would affect the Alberta Empire. How do we provide input? And who do we talk to know that we can provide that input? Who do we provide it to?
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking that. Do any of the commissioners want to speak to those questions about the process through which residents of neighborhoods like Alberta Empire can offer input as far as development happening on the south side that might affect their properties?
And specifically also the confusion between Blueprint and the city about decision-making and what happens.
Sure. I'll jump in. So first off, Blueprint. Blueprint is the city and the county sitting collectively as one board, all 12 commissioners, deciding infrastructure projects that are funded by our penny sales tax. So the major road projects you see, like FAMU Way, Cascades Park, those types of bigger infrastructure projects are generally Blueprint projects, and Blueprint essentially designs and builds the projects, and then later maybe the city will take ownership and deal with the upkeep and those sorts of things. To your question specifically about Alberta Empire, as soon as if it's a specific property, your property specifically, and you like us to keep note of it, and as soon as we hear something, let you know, we could absolutely do that. But we do, as projects come on. I've heard speculations about things in Alberta Empire. I haven't seen anything concrete at this time. As soon as I do, we notify you and let you know, or there may not be. I'm not sure. I can't give you a definitive answer because it just hasn't been provided to us at this point. But also working with our staff, we can connect you in the pre-planning stage to where if anything even gets speculated in your area, we can make sure somebody reaches out and lets you know. Because I do think so often that's the issue, is when the notice comes out, it's so far along the line, or there's just not enough days to properly respond. But also, as private property owners, everybody has legal rights to protest a decision, a right to legal counsel if eminent domain actions are being suggested or threatened. So if you would want to email or reach out to our office directly about your specific road or area, we can make sure as soon as anything's on our radar, we let you know.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams-Cox, would you like to respond?
I don't think I can add much more than Commissioner Matlow has provided. I too am available. Ms. McCaskill, if you would give me your information in the chat, I can call you and have a personal conversation with you, or come by and visit with you for you to address your concerns.
Thank you. I just want to flag Commissioner Porter put in the chat that she had to jump off this call for her regularly scheduled town hall. So she will return if the meeting continues, but I just wanted to let everyone know who's maybe not paying attention to the chat, so you're not wondering why I've decided to ignore Commissioner Porter all of a sudden. Someone wrote in the chat, Saran Riggins wrote in the chat, what have you heard, so that we will know what to look out for, which I think was in response to what you said, Commissioner Matlow, about having heard speculation about Alberta Empire. Could you answer that?
Yeah, sure. And I'm looking at Max Epstein. There's conversations in the community as far as our staff hasn't provided us any information, and currently there's nothing underway that would fit that criteria. If it's been, there's an idea about it happening later, I'm just not informed enough to know about it. Max, I think you maybe were one of the people who mentioned this. So.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I found it was actually applied for by the city, and this is an issue, I think, because another group that I've been working with, the Wakulla Springs, or the Wakulla Basin Alliance, has been looking for updates on consent orders and other things through DEP. that have happened seemingly without going through the city commission. And this is an example of a permit that was applied for, and it may only be a conceptual permit, and it may not have any sort of actual bearing on the project. But it's concerning because this was done by staff. And this was not shown before the commission before applying for it. And it shows over half of the neighborhood covered as potentially affected. So I'm just speaking as a citizen. It seems like that sort of thing should be going through the city commission, where it's presented and there's information saying, hey, we're going to apply for this permit. Hey, we're looking at this project in the future. How do we start this outreach? So like you said, it's just speculation at this point because there's a permit that shows a pond there, but we don't know what. And I just wanted to make sure that folks were aware of what was potentially going to be happening.
I want to speak to this very, very briefly, particularly for Connie McCaskill, that I had a 2-hour meeting with Jody Cahoon, who's the head engineer of stormwater in the city. And I looked at all these maps, and I feel pretty confident that you right now, thank goodness, most likely don't have anything to worry about, that the expansion of Lake Alberta is planned down the road, not anytime soon, but only onto land that is already owned by the city, and no new houses will be acquired. So I feel pretty confident, based on the conversations and the generosity of the Mr. Cahoon's time, that is the case for Lake Alberta. But the bigger question that I'm hearing residents speak about is unease and concern and distress about feeling insecure about their neighborhood, their land, their home, and really wanting to have much more outreach and communication so they can feel confident. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I want to turn it over to Max now, which I'll do in part by just flagging that Shawana asked in the chat, if not Alberta Empire, what's in the works for the South Side in general. And so I think that through the conversation that we're about to have with Max, that question will come up. So now I am taking off my
let's start off with that question, because what I had written down was, what are your ideas for increasing transparency about processes of infrastructure development in Tallahassee, particularly on the south side? And I'll give you a quick example of the final FAMU Way holding pond. And we went to a blueprint meeting where we had commissioners talking about flooding and preventing flooding, all sorts of other things that were not true. And when you're being told that a specific infrastructure project will stop flooding in your neighborhood, or it's going to allow you to redevelop and build on the south side, because if you look, the 400 or 500 acres that are included in the FAMU Way, that there was supposed to be redevelopment capacity there that was never included. These are things that other projects are getting. So how can we communicate this better? Because it's clear that what's being told to the citizens from staff and from some of the commissioners, at least, is not accurate. And I'm pretty sure that Commissioner brought this kind of issue up. So I'm going to turn that over to you, and I'll have a follow-up to that as well.
Either commissioner that wants to jump in is welcome to.
Yeah, sure. I guess the underlying question, honestly, is something I've expressed frustration about as well. I think a lot of these projects we're trying to get more public participation in. We saw this with a big project also in the Northeast, where a lot of different neighborhood groups and citizens groups came out. And I think we're very good at hosting events and having the information provided and having staff available. I think where we fall short is taking that feedback to heart and reimagining projects based on what we hear. And I think that takes a bit of a priority change. I know a lot of times new development gets framed as like people who are anti-development or people, and they don't want to see anything. They don't want to see a tree removed. They don't want us to grow versus, pro-growth type development. And it's really hard to build a consensus and really get people to just honestly come to the table, have a faith walk and say, I think if we all discuss this and the facts, even if it slows it down a few months, even if it slows it down a year, I think we will come out with a better project. I do think we can still get there. I don't think we're there yet. I think some of the projects we're so far along. I think the more we're on the commission, and I think since 2016, we've seen a huge change in elected leadership. It's a totally different world than it was. I think a lot of the powerful interests in town have less power than they've ever had. You have more open-minded officials that want to consider everybody's angle. And I think that's a powerful thing to harness, but I do think we still have to do better on that deliverable. And it's easy when, some things, and I think of the Boynton Still issue was, we were getting sworn in when that was like starting to get started. And another, critique of the process we inherited when we got sworn in, we were only doing blueprint meetings 4 times a year. So by the time some of these projects were at your doorstep, it maybe only met 6 times. And as a city commission, we meet bi-weekly, and we know the ins and outs of everything we're working on. So the system that's set up in blueprint being shared by the city and county and an independent operating agency, I think it makes it tough. It makes it tough for our elected officials. It makes it tough for our citizens. And then you get that confusion of like, is this city? Is this blueprint? Who's doing this? Why is it doing? But at the end of the day, we need to identify what needs to change and do a better job.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add, Commissioner Williams-Cox?
I'll just say this, Max, that I'm not a stormwater expert. I know, and you know that, and you don't expect me to be that. We rely on people with this knowledge, and that includes you and others in the community, as well as staff. The best thing that we can do is to take the information, ask the questions, and try to communicate that as best we can. As Commissioner Matlow said, by the time we came on board, these projects had been on the books 10 years or more. And I was hearing from the community, don't stop this project. We want our neighborhoods to look good on the south side, like neighborhoods on the other side of town looks. And when those things occur, there has to be a way to retain water for runoff. There has to be a way to protect the houses around it. And I'm no flood expert either. I know that there's a lot of flooding happens on had been happening on the south side. I listened to the neighborhood that was closest to that spot. I listened to folks who had been invested in the FAMU Way project, the advisory committee, and many others, and Florida A&M. And I think that in the end, what we have is a FAMU Way that welcomes people, whether they're on a bike, a car, a skateboard, or what have you. It's a beautiful entryway into Florida A&M, into that part of the South Side, and it looks like what South Side can look like if we're all willing to do our part to make sure that the South Side of town measures up to any other side of town. A lot of attention has been placed on other parts of the city. It is now time to place attention and increase the quality of life and have an impact on poverty on this side of town as well. And so all of that goes into decision making, communicating with individuals to make sure that, as Commissioner Porter said, that we're not causing harm. We absolutely have to do that. But again, the goal is not to cause harm, but to help. And that's where I come from, trying to help. That's all I've ever tried to do. And so sometimes we might get it wrong, And if we do, then we have to do what we need to do to make it better for the next time. So that's the only thing I can add to that.
Well, thank you. I don't expect you to know everything about stormwater, but I have to tell you, we're talking about this citizen input. I don't think anything that I or the other citizens, which has been really dozens of people, scientists and other concerned folks, even just about the design, has been taken into consideration anywhere. And it's very hard to continue forward with that. And as Commissioner Matlow said, there are other times where projects, I don't think anyone was arguing to stop the project completely. That was not the case. The question was, can we make this project better? And again, when you're telling people that it's going to stop flooding and it doesn't do that, there's an issue. There's an issue when you're communicating to those neighborhoods and the people that are affected. And I'm not going to harp on this much longer because it is in the past, but we do know people were harmed by this project, and Blueprint has the power to fix it, but has decided not to. They've decided to fix some of it going forward. That's great. But you look at Blairstone Road, they paused it a couple times and it came out way better and everyone was happy. And that project had to be delayed. FAMU Way was delayed another year because they had to come up with a new stormwater model. And these are all the things that we brought as a community to the Blueprint Board, and they were ignored, but they had to be fixed in the end anyway. So that's what we're trying to fix is when we come to you, how can we get that input in? No one wants to stop many of these projects. We just want to make them better. So this brings up the next point. Has the power or interest of the commissioners of city and county regarding Blueprint's projects declined over the last 10 years? And how can you make sure that you, the commissioners, are getting accurate information for the votes on these projects? Because when you have citizens like us that come to you and say, hey, we've looked at the data, there's something wrong here, you're not being communicated to correctly. How do we avoid that? Do you think that this power, does the staff have more power now than the commissioners themselves? I think this is kind of a feeling in the community. And this especially has to do with environmental projects where we see Patriarch Oaks being destroyed that could be incorporated in, or clear cutting. And these are all things that affect people downstream. So I'm gonna throw that out to you. If we want to stay in order, I guess I'll call on you, Commissioner Matlow first.
Does the commission have less power than it previously had? I would say no. No, it has the same amount of power. Every decision that goes through Blueprint, whether you make that individual decision or not, the ultimate accountability is your elected officials, and that flows through elected officials on the city side, the city manager who oversees the director of place, Ben Penegry, and that's kind of the chain of command of power. So ultimately, if there are unresolved issues, the city commission and the county commission has the ultimate power to make a change. You asked about interest, and I think what you're getting at is Commissioner Proctor likes to say is the tail wagging the dog. He recently said, I felt like you're a lobbying firm lobbying us to make a decision. So I do think that there are criticisms that could be leveraged that constructive conversations can come out of to make a change of, one, how things are presented, how balanced it is, and are we always actually weighing the pros and cons of each decision versus a predetermined outcome. I will say, as I said earlier, with only 4 to 6 meetings a year, there are a lot of staff-made decisions on these projects. We set the upper tier level of, what the project is, but ultimately, things like eminent domain, those things have to come back for a formal vote. The major purchases don't necessarily have to. The design process, from a policy perspective, you know, a roadway to the airport, like we know the road that's going to go on. We know the path. We're not making individual decisions, but we are directing the staff to reach out to the neighborhoods. I personally walked Blueprint staff in the Providence Neighborhood Association down the path of a projected roadway, so people can actually be on the ground and hear the concern. So it's mixed because you know, we get this you know, the staff did this, the staff did this, the staff did this. And to me, ultimately, the commission did that. You know, our elected officials did that, and we need to own it and I direct outrage towards us as elected officials, because we're the only people who actually do have the power to change something that you may be upset about. I mean, does that mean I think staff is always right? Do I agree with the way they present things? Do I think that there's an imbalance, especially at the top of Blueprint, not necessarily the Blueprint director and OAV director, but the way items are presented? Absolutely. I think there may be an issue there. And I think you've heard that expressed by multiple commissioners at board meetings.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams-Cox, and I'm gonna, since Jack is back, I'm gonna read the question back because she did touch on some of this earlier today.
You're gonna read it now, or you gonna want me to?
Well, I mean, you want me to read it now, or it's up to you?
No, it's up to you, Max.
Okay, well, I'll just say it once more since Jack is here. Has the power interest of the city county commissioners regarding Blueprint's plans declined over the 10 years? And how can the commissioners themselves ensure they get accurate information when they vote on these decisions?
Okay. The power resides with the people. The people voted for the Blueprint projects. The people vote for commissioners to represent them. So the power has not shifted. The power still remains with the people. Where the issue is that we're listening to all people. In the city of Tallahassee, we have 200,000 residents, and in the county, we have 300,000. And you must know that for every pro, there's a con. For every con, there's a pro. So we have to listen to all of the issues, and we have to make a balanced decision based on the information that we have available to us. The information that not only staff, but those professionals who are trained to do this work provide. The information that we get from the community of people who may be doing this work outside of our staff, and our own research. I do my own research. I take my briefings, I ask questions, I ask staff for additional information. I Google is our friend. I Google to find information on my own. I look at what other cities are doing, what other states are doing. I also look at what the law is, because some things we're bound to by law. So the people voted for the Blueprint projects. The projects are underway and have started. And it is our job as commissioners, and we have one vote. There are 12 of us, and we have one vote. But the power resides with the people. And so there has been no power shift. The power still remains with you. We do hear your input. And you know, just because your input isn't always, your recommendation is not always implemented, it doesn't mean that we did not hear it. It means that some additional information either you may not have had, or I got that I couldn't come back to you and quickly enough and say, you know, this, and this has occurred. These are the reasons why. So again, I'll end with this. The power remains with the people.
Thank you. I'll throw that back to Jack too, if you're around, if you'd like to answer.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that as a new commissioner, it is certainly overwhelming because, I mean, I think I'll speak for myself. You know, when I've got 1,000 pages of material to read through, and sometimes that's just for one meeting in a week, it's really difficult. And we are trusting staff to give us the information that we need. And there have been times where I feel like I have not gotten the information that I need to make a decision, and where there is a vested interest in a certain project, or there's some background or some context that I wasn't aware of. And that is going to happen sometimes. I think with Blueprint, anything, but not just Blueprint, in general, when we commit to plans, like anything, we want to make good on our promises to the community, but we also understand that we're going to learn more information as time goes on, and there's going to be updates and, you know, best practices. And I do personally believe that it's, when we talk about what people voted for that passed by 60% or whatever, we're really talking about investment in our infrastructure. And I personally, and I see the comments and I agree, am less of the mind that people voted for these very specific projects. I know that they were listed, but I also know that they were not part of the ballot language. And I also know that the average voter probably had no idea what they were voting for in terms of specific projects. And even if they had, there have been elections ever since. And I was very vocal about certain Blueprint projects. That being said, the public that comes out and that speaks, the public that votes with their voice, during election season, that is all important and part of the process. It can be very difficult to, as a commissioner, to know sometimes what is really going on, what is best, what is really the will of the people who are most affected. There are a lot of things that we have to consider. But I do think we know that there are people who are more powerful than others, even though our democracy, ideally is set up to give, one person, one vote. This is the reality we live in, and it's our job. I see it as my job to, as I think Commissioner Bill Proctor put it really well, and Commissioner Matlow mentioned, the people who need us most are not voting, they're not coming to meetings, and it's our job to think of them. And it's a lot of work, and it's a huge responsibility. Thank you.
It is huge. And that brings me to my next question. And I wanted to bring this first back just briefly to what this is about. And this is about exactly who you just said, folks who maybe cannot be as engaged as we are. Folks that are not as privileged as I am to be able to host these meetings. And when someone like me and 100 people show up to a commission meeting, and I went to all of the Northeast Gateway, I didn't hear a single person in favor of this, I think pretty much anywhere. So if we're talking about the South Side and our underprivileged areas, well, they bear the brunt of a lot of our environmental issues. The wastewater treatment plants, now that are being replaced by stormwater treatment facilities. These are not things you really want to have in your backyard. And there's all sorts of potentially sewage that's leaking into Lake Munson, the Bragg ponds. There are other water bodies, including Carter House Strong Park, that may have the highest incidence of sewage that's flowing into it. So my question is, where is the increased, is there room for increased citizen input regarding these plans? And what are your ideas for increased citizens input? Because I gave the example of the Blairstone Road that was stopped It was people worked on it and everyone was happy when it was over with. I'm just telling you, as someone who does a lot of the research and comes to the meetings and can show up, to not feel like I'm listened to. How are other people feeling who are directly affected by this, who may lose their home, who may have a new stormwater treatment facility next to them that grows toxic algae? So how can we bridge this gap?
I just want to jump in really quickly and just to echo what Max is saying, to read some of the things that people are saying in the chat. Someone wrote, I did not vote for the stadium to be refurbished with regressive tax money. Someone else wrote, we did not vote on the blueprint projects. We voted on a penny tax extension for infrastructure. Someone wrote, we did not vote on a blank check for blueprint. Continuing to scroll down. Someone wrote, the vote for projects were made to enhance, not to leave the citizens footing the bill. So that's just echoing what Max is saying and asking if there are any real specific concrete strategies for citizen input that would affect the direction of these projects.
How can we have the citizens create these projects? So I know that's not entirely possible, but what are your ideas here?
Well, first I would say it's all it's when you say citizens, it has to be from all different sections of our communities, all different types of backgrounds, all different types of income levels, gender, race, what have you. Because I mean, the truth is, citizens did recommend this project, and I'm really of the mind that is where some of this went astray, because we had a group of people who were a citizens committee really fleshing out how to spend nearly $1 billion, who maybe don't necessarily have the overarching emphasis. I always tell people there's always going to be a decision that I make that you're going to disagree with, because I consider everybody from all political persuasions, from all areas, to be my constituent. And I need to deliver for everybody in Tallahassee, because I don't want anybody who doesn't necessarily, maybe they don't agree with me and my politics or what I'm about, but I do want to represent everybody. So on specific projects, does community involvement change them? And I think historically the answer has been yes, though it does take more organizing, more people, and more structure than it is for people of moneyed influence to be able to get what they want. That's always the battle, right? It seems like the people with more money can,
Yes.
for whatever reason, their opinion's worth more than a single person's opinion. And I don't think that's necessarily right. But when we look at what was mentioned the other night, Gain Street was originally going to be expanded to a 6-lane highway. With public pressure, it got modified into what it is today. A lot of citizens spent years on that. A lot of them left unhappy still with the project because of bike facilities and other things that they were engaged in. And I think those types of engagements, we saw, citizens stand up against a sand mine on the west side of town that would have had huge environmental negative effects on the residents that lived 100 feet away. You saw the changes next to Myers Park. You saw there was a gas station proposed for the corner of Blairstone and Miccosukee not too long ago. And citizens did reach out and say, this isn't what government's supposed to be doing. Government made us agreements, and you did see action on those. So I don't want anyone to feel like standing up and speaking is futile. I know a lot of times it may feel like you lose, everything. A lot of times I feel like I lose, everything. But every meeting is a new meeting, and as a collegial body, we go in. It's a new day. We respect each other, and we debate the merits of the procedures. So the overarching question: how do you get more citizens engagement? I mean, I think you have to start from scratch of what a policy looks like to really engage people, find out who want to be engaged. Charrettes can be effective when you actually see the changes incorporated. And I think a lot of the times when you get pushback is when things cost more money to go in a different direction. The sad thing is the most detrimental path can sometimes be the least expensive, and that seems to always be the first thing that's suggested. And those are the types of things that I think we can get ahead of and set priorities for, again, because it's not uncommon for a project to become more expensive. We saw that in the Bannerman project. I think we're seeing that in the Northeast Gateway. We'll see that probably over 20 years in a lot of different projects, because as people in the chat said, I didn't vote on a specific project. There were projects proposed, but there's nothing is set in stone with how blueprint projects what the finish line looks like. And we've seen that. We've seen projects like the Airport Gateway, which was going Lake Bradford to Spring Hill, add an additional fork to go through Florida State's campus. So any project can be changed with a supermajority vote of the blueprint board. Any project could be eliminated with a super majority of the blueprint board, but it will take more organizing and a solid vision for where we want to go. I think we can both do that better as elected officials and staff, and getting our staff to work more hand in hand and be more responsive. And I think, again, I always encourage people, and I see several people on this call that we see in our public meetings quite often, but we need more. People need to know the diverse representation, everybody who's involved. And sometimes that's like this meeting, flyering, calling out, letting people know it's happening, letting them know to contact us and express their opinion.
Commissioner Matlow, thank you so much. I'm jumping in again, just as my timekeeper hat on here, that we're at our hour-and-a-half mark. So we are starting to wrap up, but we're not wrapped up yet. I want to honor what I'm hearing from multiple commissioners say, that communication is important from us, the residents, as well as from them to us. So all of us that are on this call tonight, especially people that are new, that have spoken up politically for the first time, showing up is important, and putting your email in the chat is important, and making more networks to get more organized, to support our commissioners, to stay connected to what's best for the residents. It's really important. So what we're doing here is great. I want to just check with the leadership team here. Was there another question Max wanted? And do we have any voice, such as maybe Miss Eunice, who has showed up tonight, who has not spoken before? And is there any question or comment from anyone that has not spoken, that's a resident that might like to be heard? And Nasa, do you have moderator thoughts on that?
I do. I want to give the other two commissioners an opportunity to answer Max's question. But also, yes, I think maybe after that we'll wrap up. And please, anyone, put your questions in the chat. I already see one that would be a good ending question. But yeah, let's let Commissioners Porter and Williams-Cox answer Max's question also.
Well, I can go ahead, and I want to be mindful of time, and I agree with what's been said. I think that there are a lot of tools at our disposal, whether it's pausing some projects, whether it's going back to the drawing table. So, I mean, we're talking specifically about blueprint, but then we just in general, how do we make sure that there is the most direct connection between resident engagement and resident input with real decisions and the decision making that happens? And that's where so often people feel that there is a gap, because there is indeed one. I think the city leadership, we hear a lot from residents. Sometimes I really get frustrated because I feel like we hear, and we have a lot of meetings, and then it just never seems to be incorporated into what we actually end up doing. So I think there's some good questions that we can be asking ourselves about the community engagement process. How inclusive is the participation? How democratic is the deliberation? I think that there are some really cool models in other cities, something called participatory budgeting, which I think would be a really great experiment for us to consider here locally, whether it's with our CRA or with our blueprint. No process is going to be perfect. And I do think we know that. But I think even on the citizen committees, you know, I often see the same people serving on all the committees, all the decision-making committees. And these people, while many of them have expertise and volunteer their time, and I know care about their communities, they are not necessarily representative of the community as a whole, and they often have their own interests, and they are not accountable in the same way that elected officials are accountable. And so I do think, and we've even seen with our recent audit report, that we have fallen short in making sure that people who sit on these committees do not have conflicts of interest or are actually eligible to serve. And these are issues that we do need to address if we are going to restore public trust in this process moving forward.
And I will just add that the way that you get more citizens input is do just what you're doing. As I said to you, for 30 years, I've worked in this community. I've gone to city commission meetings. I've gone to county commission meetings. I've gone to school board meetings, legislative meetings. You can't just lay down. You have to keep coming. And you don't always get what you want, but sometimes you do. So I encourage you to stay engaged, continue to come. Don't get weary. I did this for 30 years. You know, I got wrinkles that I never used to have because of the faces I used to have to make to keep from saying what I really wanted to say in some of these meetings. So I encourage you to just keep coming, keep coming. Don't get weary. Stay woke, stay involved, stay informed, and continue to come.
Well, thank you. I don't know if I'm preventing some wrinkles by saying my mind at these meetings, but gray hairs, maybe. Yeah. So I appreciate it.
As long as you keep your hair, Max, you're going to be good. Gray hair is good.
I'm trying. I don't know, but I'm trying. Thank you. I see, Stephen, you have your hand up. Do you want to make just a very brief comment or question?
Yeah, I was going to say what Commissioner Porter had said. Yeah, they get the committees, but you see the same people over and over again. And when you were mentioning about staff giving their input, yeah, staff also is employed and they have a director who they have to answer to. So I've met people who have been employed with county, city, and state agencies when they're not in uniform. And I asked them, why didn't you say this there? They say they want to have a uniform to wear tomorrow. I remember Chasing Woods, and we had somebody with growth management lose their job for speaking out against what was already known that the boss wanted. So staff is kind of under pressure to not go against what their superiors are asking of them. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you. I know in my conversations with people who have been affected by these projects, I have heard repeatedly, I work for the city, or I don't want to make the mayor mad at me. And so maybe this will be a discussion topic at our next meeting, because there's a lot of stuff we didn't get to, including our tree ordinance and our cultural resources, which all play into this idea of environmental justice. And do you all think that we're doing a good job to preserve these things? I think you know my answer. And I think a lot of this does come down to the regulatory portion of it and growth management. So maybe that can be our next panel, is that sort of thing. All right, well, if there's nothing else, I appreciate it. I'll let everyone else on my team say something or jump in before we end if they need.
Well, really quickly, I just want to thank all of the commissioners who came. Truly, thank you so much. You did not have to come. You did not have to spend your Thursday night with us, but we are really, really so happy that you did, because as Claudia has pointed out, not a lot of residents don't have the opportunity to hear you all talk a lot, especially when there's not an election happening. So we're really grateful for the opportunity to hear what you all have to say. And just to Commissioner Porter's point, that Steve Martin just reiterated, as far as kind of the same people, the same citizens, not elected officials, but the same people being on committee after committee and pushing forward their interests, which, you know, they are sincere about, but might not be everyone's interests. We hope that some people on this call right now who are clearly concerned and interested in these ideas might consider joining these committees, diversifying them as far as their viewpoints and their interests. I think there certainly needs to be a more transparent pathway to input and engagement with the commissioners. But Commissioner Williams-Cox is also correct that at the end of the day, we vote for the people who make these decisions. So we also have to stay engaged and to stay woke. So thank you. Thank everyone for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. And I'll stick around a couple minutes if anyone wants to talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Claudia, I think you're muted if you're trying to speak. I see your lips moving.
Thank you so much. I'm just echoing more thanks from the leadership to our commissioners, to our residents, and gratitude that we can have some challenge and some passionate discourse, because we all care and we have different ideas and we listen to each other respectfully and with vigor and our hearts. So I appreciate that as well, and look forward to keeping up with new community that has showed up tonight for committee engagement, for active engagement. So thank you all again and have a beautiful night.
All right, well, if anyone wants to chat, say so now, or I'll end the recording and get everyone on home. Okay, well, thanks y'all. See you later.